Are you a Tolkien fan? If yes, then at least once you probably would have thought, why didn't Sauron use the Balrog? Why didn't Sauron enlist these powerful enemies in his army of evil? Why did he not build the ultimate dream squad of villains? Hey, I know you're thinking it. We can feel you. However, we too gave these questions a thought and came up with some theories. So if you want to find out if our theories align with yours, stay tuned till the end of this video and let's begin. During the last phase of the Third Age, Middle-earth was at its most robust stage. Apart from Sauron's impending menace, two other prominent figures were creating waves at the moment. These figures are the dragon Smaug, who was relaxing in the comfort of the Lonely Mountain, and the Balrog, who was hiding in Moria's shadowy depths. Think for a moment if these three powerful players could have never played together. Did that seem like a ridiculous idea? To get the answer to this question, let's travel far back in time to the beginning of Middle-earth to unravel this mystery. Back in the First Age, everything was set up for a titanic battle between the forces of good and the ultimate villain, Melkor. The War of Wrath was an enormous conflict similar to a cosmic battle royal. And, you know what? Melkor vanished into the vacuum, never to be seen again as good triumphed. Can you recall that a few of Melkor's goons were able to get past the guards? Those annoying little troublemakers, the orcs, found a method to hide and continue wreaking havoc. But what about the dragons, you think? Except for one rebellious individual who chose to stay behind, they all fled north in a breath. And then there is the Balrog, Durin's Bane, a fiery lieutenant of Melkor. After evading capture, this cunning individual went into hiding to wait for an unknown amount of time. While following Melkor's humiliation, Sauron, the chief antagonist of the First Age, was able to elude capture. Sauron chose to hide rather than face the music with the superiors, most likely out of fear of receiving a severe reprimand from them. This devious action signaled the beginning of his comeback tour and laid the groundwork for the turmoil that characterized the Third Age. The dragons and the Balrog were not to be found throughout the Second Age, when Sauron was preparing his spectacular comeback. They were most likely off on their own, keeping quiet while everyone else was preoccupied with other matters. As the Second Age ended, Sauron suffered a serious blow. He was kicked out of his flashy corporeal form and lost his valuable One Ring. But he would not stay down like a lousy penny. His soul persisted, reviving gradually and steadily. Although it took him an entire millennium, he eventually returned to activity in the Third Age, establishing himself in Dol Guldur while being extremely discreet about his presence. Our fiery friend the Balrog, on the other hand, had been hibernating since the First Age and had taken sanctuary in the Misty Mountains. Surprisingly, Balrog was conveniently raised by its former lord, Melkor. The strange nameless things, though through some hidden corridors, were able to keep the Balrog hidden from the outside world and send him into a long slumber. However, in 1980, during the Third Age, some inquisitive dwarves, while conducting some excavating in the mountains, discovered its hiding place. Let's just say that it's not a good idea to wake up a Balrog from its beauty nap. It destroyed the dwarves and seized control of their ancient kingdom after unleashing its wrath on them. The Balrog is a dangerous threat that lurks in Moria, and Sauron is the main antagonist of the Third Age. Was Sauron aware of this flaming being? Yes, that's pretty plausible. Let's see what actually happened once Balrog came into the picture. An interesting image is painted by the chronology. About a millennium after Sauron's spectacular return to power in Dol Guldur, the Balrog awoke from its slumber. Sauron was not just sitting about doing anything during that century. Instead, he was hard at work reassembling his army and capturing Nazgul, the Easterlings, and the Orcs. It's likely that he finally learned of the Balrog's awakening, even if he may not have been aware of it at first. Ultimately, the irate neighbor's nasty awakening could not have escaped the Orcs residing in Moria. The true puzzler, though, is how come Sauron didn't try to team up with the Balrog, right? Now that seems like a legit doubt. especially after the White Council unexpectedly turned up to his Dol Guldur party, which made him quickly withdraw to Mordor. At this critical juncture, coalitions may have changed the course of the conflict. Sauron may have had a significant advantage by forming an alliance with the Balrog, which would have allowed him to trample through locations like Lothlorien or wreak havoc at the Lonely Mountain. This question is not just all. There is more to ponder. It begs the question of whether Sauron possessed the necessary skills to manipulate the Balrog. You see, they are both Mairs with a lot of power from the same cosmic club. Although Sauron possessed a considerable amount of power, the most alarming aspect is that he invested much of it in the One Ring, which he did not yet possess. Could he then have subdued the Balrog? That is a question worth considering. However, without a doubt, Sauron was an expert manipulator. What about the Balrog, though? It was such a natural force, a primordial being fed by both darkness and fire. Was Sauron able to shape it to suit his needs, or would the Balrog have roasted him for lunch and laughed in his face? The question is, would Sauron have gained any advantage by controlling the Balrog, even if he had been able to do so? Well, the answer to that is yes. It would have been a formidable friend, but we must remember that the Balrog was a wild card, a destructive force. Attempting to control that beast might have resulted in a spectacular failure. For Sauron, losing the One Ring was a serious setback. This implied that he could no longer demonstrate his supremacy over strong entities such as the Balrog. You see, he sent his minions to demand the loyalty of the dwarves when he dealt with them, and that was not an option, however, with the Balrog. Without his priceless ring, Sauron lacked the strength to subdue a beast with the power of the Balrog. So why then didn't he attempt to ally with the Balrog? Yes, we have many questions for this series, but there are legit answers to them. Let's start by asking if the Balrog would ever choose to work with Sauron. That's a nice question, right? Well, the Balrog was officially employed by Sauron back in the First Age when he was a much bigger figure. However, that was in the past when Melkor, the ultimate villain, controlled both of them. But now in Moria, the Balrog was in charge, controlling its flaming territory. Why then would you give up all that power to work with Sauron? The problem with Balrogs is that they are somewhat mysterious. Balrogs appear to be more interested in wreaking havoc for fun than certain other powerful figures such as Saruman, who was all about moving up the power ladder. They only enjoy causing mayhem. They are not interested in gaining power or fame for themselves. Therefore, there is no assurance that Balrog would have been interested in a team-up, even if Sauron had extended an invitation. It would be difficult to invite a tornado to a tea party, for example. So was the Balrog something Sauron needed on his side? To be honest, the fans are not sure. What about you? Do you have an idea? Although it would have been amazing to have a massive fiery creature on his side, Sauron was no pushover. Furthermore, it is possible that attempting to control a wild card like the Balrog caused more problems than it was worth. Ultimately, Sauron had to consider the advantages and disadvantages and determine if it was worthwhile for him to pursue the Balrog. Not only was Sauron weak and unsure of the Balrog's reaction, but there may have been more to his decision not to approach the Balrog about allying. You see, Sauron was no ordinary villain. Instead, he was a crafty tactician, an expert manipulator, who gained knowledge from none other than his former boss, Melkor. Thus, he could have been hiding something. In simple words, the Balrog was already helping Sauron out by existing in its comfortable location in Moria. It was a pain in the side of Sauron's foes, the elves, humans, and dwarves, regardless of whether it actively helped Sauron or not. It commanded a crucial region. The worst part is that Sauron's ally, the Balrog, did not instigate mayhem among these mutual enemies. Hey, did you remember Khazad-dûm, the large dwarven stronghold? It was indeed taken over by the Balrog. Furthermore, without it, the dwarves were dispersed and able to mount a strong defense against Sauron's schemes. So, given that Sauron maintained a grudge against the dwarves since their appearance to assist Elrond in the Battle of Eregion, it was a significant event for them. But there is more to this story. Guarding one of their most important passageways through the Misty Mountains, Moria was not just any old castle. And Moria was like the last line of defense against the Caradhras, which were already under Orc Watch with another pass. In the unlikely event that someone made it through the perilous trek through Caradhras, Moria awaited its own set of difficulties, including deep snow, violent storms, and an unfavorable atmosphere. Now, you'll be able to understand that Sauron and the Balrog didn't need to be friends. Whether it realized it or not, the Balrog was already contributing to Sauron's agenda. Ultimately, it was probably less hazardous and easier to keep the Balrog content in its flaming stronghold than to try to force it into an alliance. Therefore, even though the Balrog was a powerful ally, there are instances when it's preferable to leave flaming monsters to sleep and take pleasure in the mayhem they cause. However, it was difficult to navigate the Misty Mountains. Armies found it difficult to advance across the dangerous terrain, which presented a problem for Sauron and other people who were keeping a watch out for Elrond of Rivendell's possible threat. Particularly through the Second Age, Elrond had a talent for giving Sauron headaches. If Sauron decided to let his armies loose, he could not take the chance of Elrond swooping in to help Gondor. That is to say, the Balrog's presence in Moria effectively sealed off the Misty Mountains Pass. To go to Elrond for assistance, one would have to travel the perilous Khazad-dûm or encounter Saruman's unwelcoming demeanor, as he was unwaveringly loyal to Team Sauron. You might be wondering why Sauron chose to court the Balrog instead of seeking additional artillery. In addition to being a control freak who detested ceding control, Sauron had a good sense of self-confidence. Glancing around, he saw that Arnor had vanished, the dwarves were dispersed, the elves were dwindling, and Gondor was a ghost of its former self. Sauron underestimated his opponent's tenacity and believed he had this entire conquest thing under control. Sauron believed he had the win secured, so why even bother allying with the Balrog? So here is the true and the most legitimate answer to this doubt. It did not fit his ambitions for dominance to share power with a flaming ancient monster, and nobody knows what the Balrog's goals were. Later on, it may choose to contest Sauron's dominion. When the Balrog was unintentionally helping Sauron by remaining still in Moria, why take the chance of provoking an adversary by upsetting it? Thus, as with Shelob, Sauron left the Balrog alone. Similar to Shelob, the Balrog didn't precisely fulfill its role in Sauron's elaborate plan. Leaving fire-breathing monsters to sleep is sometimes the wisest course of action. So this is what we have understood about the subject. Let us know, what are your views on it? Share your opinions in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed watching today's video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.